All right, hello guys. So for this lecture, what we're going to be talking about is how to write and how to save to files. And this is important because so forth, whenever we did something, so let's actually create a new main here for a second. So whenever we did anything, let's say with the user or whatever happened with our application, the data has never been saved for future use. Every time the application starts, it's a brand new application that doesn't or can't remember the previous interaction with the user. So the data is usually volatile. This is something we call volatile, basically meaning it's non-persistent. It cannot be there the next time we run our application. One example would be the memory inside your computer. As applications come in, it will give the memory it requires for the application, but afterwards, it would erase any usage of that memory. Okay? So this is called something volatile. What we want to do is to have a memory or data information that is not volatile, that is persistent. So one way of doing this is to write it to a file where the next time we come back, we could just read from that file and and do whatever we need. So we store data, we read the data, and etc. Right? So let's go on presentation mode actually. All right, and over here I really just have the main, nothing really intricate. So the first thing we need to do, I'm going to leave this open because you're going to see we're going to create some files here. The first thing we need to do is to play around with this thing we call the file object, another code that someone made. And you'll notice it'll start giving you a lot of classes with file. And a lot of them are interesting classes that could interact with files and do some weird stuff, such as zipping a file, etc. Well, the one we want right now is this one called filejava.io. If we press enter, it'll import the code for it. Let's say my file. And over here, we're going to create that file. So new file. And if we open this constructor, you'll notice it has overloaded constructors 4 times. I hope you guys kind of know. So to create the file, we need to call one of these constructors. And each one of them, they take a specific thing. If you want to know more about each one of these constructors, if you're in this IDE, you could press Control Q and you could get information on the one you want to use. So we have file, string path, and prefix length, etc., etc. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to go with the one that says file, string path name. And as soon as you do Control Q, you get this information which would tell you more about it, more details. And this is how you're going to be learning and interacting when you go to a job and you'll be using stuff that you never did, right? So this interaction is really important. Control Q and Control P. Control Q gives you the information. Control P gives you the parameter list that could go in here. All right. So when we're creating a file, when we create this object, we need to give it a path to where the file is, which is this one, the path name. So, and we would put that inside this string, right? Again, you'll see the ID is showing this path name thing, but that's just saying what the variable name is. This does not exist. I did not write this. The only thing I wrote is these 2 quotes over here. If you write this, you'll get an error. So inside here, I need to specify a path to where my object is. And usually you have 2 different types of paths you could put in. One, sorry, one which is a relative path, and another one is an absolute path. So two types could go in there. Absolute path is path that you start from the root of your folders, the root location, which is usually your drive. So you're either on a C drive, on a D drive, or something. So let's say C drive. And then we go directly from there to the location of something. So if you could see my project, if we look down here, my project's absolute path is shown to us from C // users // res // idea projects / file reading. So this is a absolute path. So I'll just write it here. So the forward slash or backslash will depend on which system you're on. We'll just go with what it says. It'll take care of that for us. Res, idea. And you got to be careful with your naming. So if you make any misspelling or if you do lowercase, uppercase, all of those could bring you to a completely different location. So I don't really like to use absolute path, especially since if you write an application and you go in a different system, your absolute path might not work because they might not have that location or you might not have access to that location. So absolute path is, it's not something you want to use a lot, okay? And then you got this thing we call relative path. And inside relative path, two things will happen. Relative path means from where we currently are, move from there to somewhere else, okay? So right now, from where we currently are, we're basically inside the folder called file reading writing. So rather than writing all of this, let's say I want to create a new file at this path, I would say at the end, file, well, let's call it new, one word, new file.txt, okay? So this is an absolute path. And at this location, I want to create a new file.txt. And inside of a relative path, it will be determined by where your project is. And currently, my project is inside the same path. So in the case of relative path, I could just say new file.txt, and it will create it in the same location. That's because my project is currently residing at this place. If you had to say relative or absolute in the real world context, an absolute path is I give you a brand new address to somewhere in the city. And like absolute as in I say it's Canada, Quebec, Montreal, this region, that street, that house number, this apartment, right? Relative path, I would just say, hey, from where we are, it's your next door neighbor. Go there, right? That's relative. So inside relative, I could just say currently wherever we are, we could use this. We could also say currently by using the dot, which means the current directory. Okay? You could make this backslash or whatever. We'll test it out if it's forward or backslash. And if you wanted to go up a level, so let's say we're currently in file reading writing, and I want to be inside idea projects. Well, now I will use dot dot. Means go to parent, okay? And one dot means current directory, okay? And this is important to understand because you'll see this in a lot of systems. Inside Unix, you see it inside Linux, Unix, whatever, Mac, Windows, okay? It's a way for you to navigate your system. Right, so from here, if I wanted to go up, I'll use the command change directory, cd. Let me see if I can zoom in. I'll use the command change directory, cd. Actually, if you look, this is the current path, the current location I'm at. And I could use change directory to either go up or to, let's say, if I want to go up, I do cd dot dot, as we saw, means to go to parent. So I'll go to users. Let's say cd, and I want to go to res. Now my path changes. And dot means the current location. So if I do cd dot, it won't change because we are already at the current location. Right? So cd dot is the current location. Cd dot dot is go up a level. Cd a path name or folder name, whatever, is to go down level or go to whatever you need to. Okay? I hope that's clear. As always, stop me if something's not clear. So now, in this file path, we could either put an absolute path, right? Or we could put a relative path. So in this case, let's just put a relative path. The dot is up to us if we want to keep it or not. We could just write, let's say test file.txt. The txt part, the dot part, is the extension of the file. Really, the extension is just to allow the computer, the OS, to understand which application should open this file. It doesn't really care what the extension is. You could create your own extensions as you want. It's just to give a guidance to the OS to call the correct applications to open your file. Okay? So, having having this new file, this is going to help us either open that file or create it for us. We want to, first thing we want to do is to write towards it. Okay, so there's a lot of these what do you call it? These file writers that exist. Okay, we're going to use one of them, but there's a lot of variations. And this is important because there's actually two ways you could write to a file. One is you write to a file in text format where you could read it, right? And another one is where you could write to a file where you write in bytes, so bit code, so zeros and ones. And why would you want to do one or the other? Well, if you write it in ASCII value in these text format, in these letters, well, the file becomes readable to anyone. So me and you, we could read the file, and that's nice because we could go check it quickly and so on. The problem with that is the file is readable to everyone. That's one of the first concerns. The second problem, it's also going to be bigger. So if your file has a lot of information, well, the file is going to be much bigger because it's in text format. While if it was in bits, well, in this case, it's much smaller because it's using the internal computer, zeros and ones. So give you an example, each character that you see here, test, let's say, there's 4 characters. Each one of those characters, they actually take around 4 bytes. So 4 bytes of information is being used to store this letter T. 4 bytes is, each byte is 8 bits. So 4 times 8, that's a lot of bits, right? While we could just use the internal bits and make it smaller, compacted, use some formatting, some compression, etc. Okay, it's something to consider. So there's 2 of these things. We're going to try it out. Well, we're going to just really try the ASCII one. But later on, maybe it's something to consider, especially if you're doing networking, where you have to send information to a server and retrieve information from a server. Cool? So let's get going. So what we need to do, I'm just thinking about which one we want to try. Give me a second. There's a couple of these that we could use, but I don't want to use all of them because just one second. Okay, we're gonna use the easiest one. I think that's gonna be the best thing. So the easiest one is we're gonna use a file writer. Let's call this one writer equals new file writer. Inside the parameters here, we need to say which file are we writing to, right? You could give it a file name path, but a better way to do is to give it the file, which is going to deal with a lot of things for us. So this file over here that we created, we're just going to pass it to my file writer. Okay, and one thing we're going to note is it's going to say, hey, you need to handle the problem that if this file doesn't exist. So it might throw an exception called input-output exception, right? Actually, just to make sure that that's the current exception. So IO exception, if the file exists but is a directory rather than a regular file, does not exist but cannot be created or cannot be opened for any other reason. So again, Control Q, we could see what issues could arise. If any of these issues arise, it will throw us this thing we call an exception. And as the programmer using the file writer, we need to be able to handle those issues that could possibly happen, right? So the exceptions are issues that we know could happen, but sometimes it happens because of issue, like something that's out of our control, but within our means to deal with it if it happens. A good example of this is, let's say you're connected to a server somewhere and the internet or the power cut off. Well, now we have a problem. And we know this could happen because it happens a lot of time. So it's something that's out of our control, but it's something expected, which is in the means to be able to handle if that situation happens. Either you try to reconnect to the server over time, or you store the data for tomorrow to send it later, right? So to handle this exception, we need to surround our code. So I'm gonna just go ahead and surround everything for now. And as we get better, we'll be a bit more specific on this. We need to surround our code, the code we see here, inside this block where we say try. We're gonna try, we're gonna try and do this. If an issue happens, well then we're gonna catch that issue, okay? And what we want to catch is the exception that it told us. So if we put our mouse over it, it says IO exception. So this part is what we want to catch. So we're going to write IO exception, and we're going to give a name for this object. I'm just going to write it like this. So I'm getting, I erased something here. Oh, sorry. What am I doing? This is inside the class. We need to put it inside our function. I was not paying attention at all. So all of this needs to go inside here. Okay, inside our static void main. I'm being a clutch. Anyway. Cool? Any questions so far? Okay, so now if I want to write to this file, again, the catch, you do whatever you need, but for now we could just ignore it completely. It's not the course yet for this, but this is a really important thing to understand and use. But anyway, so so now that we have a writer, this object that's going to write for us, now we could write to the file. And if we want to write to the file, we just got to say writer output. So you'll notice there's the system. No, that's not what I want. Writer. Let's see what it has. We have append and we have write. Right. So what we're going to do, append means to add to the end of it. In this case, we're going to just say write, and you'll notice there's a multiple overloaded functions. So we're going to add directly strings. So basically inside here, we're just going to write testing my results as an example. Okay. And one last thing we need to do, it is to close our writer. And this is important. Because files, you could think of it like a book. If you took the book, well, no one else could use that book while you're writing to it. They need to wait for you to finish before they could use the book. So a good example inside our computer is this one file is actually being used by 20 different applications. So while it's open for writing by someone, it cannot be used by anyone else. You might not see this result inside your computer is because they create temporary files to hold on to until the moment they need to write to the file. So now if I press play, remember that we're using a relative path. This should create a file called test file and add the word testing my results. So if we look, a new file has been created inside our path, which says testfile.txt. If we open that testfile.txt, we notice it says testing my results. So let's go back inside that main. I'm going to change this testing my results to Abu Dabu meow meow. And we run it again. Remember that we're using write and not append. So this time, again, it's going to write the file, but it changes all the text inside. If we wanted to append, so let's change this to append, and we do this again, and we go back to the file, you'll notice, oops, well, we didn't change the text. I'm going to do, say, Pokemon Wolf. You'll notice that now when we run it, even though it says append, our file is empty. Okay? This append is not good enough. We need to make sure that when we open the file, we're not creating a brand new file and replacing everything inside. So the file writer over here takes a second parameter, press Control P, which is saying Boolean append. So would you like to append or would you not like to append? If you don't put it, it automatically will say false. So here, if we put true, and now we run it again, you'll notice that Pokemon Wolf will actually be appended at the end. Right? Multiple times. Let's try it again with some other text. King Meow. And now we see that King Meow is also added at the end. Well, this is not good. It's always on the same line. How do we go multiple lines? Well, we could do something like this. Writer dot, let's say, let's try things out before we say what the answer is. Let's say ABC. And let's do another one like this. And you notice 1, 2, 3. So the append and the right in this case didn't change much at all. Right? So they're for specific use. This is the real append that we need to. But I have a problem is I want to go in multiple lines. How would I do this? We need to use something called an escape character. So now when this file is created, in the end, there is no such thing as space or new lines in the computer. All of this is visual for us. The same way we have a mouse. There's no such thing as a mouse. It's just something visually we display, right? These things are all just bits. So you don't see it in here, but these space and new lines are actually another character that exists. So actually, let me show you this. This is gonna be a bit easy. Explorer. Let's go inside Notepad. So if you look over here, I'm gonna turn on this, show all the characters. And you'll notice that actually here there is a character. And right now there is no new line. But as soon as I press new line, look, there is a character at the end. And this character is usually invisible to the normal user because it hurts the eyes. Right? But there's actually a new line here. The space is there. There's actually another one which is for tabs. Notice that this icon appears. Let's close this and we're not going to say. So how can we do this stuff? Well, these are called escape characters. To do that, inside the string, we're going to do a backslash. You'll notice it's going to turn colors. I'm going to say new line. N is the keyword for new line. Then afterwards, let's say the ABC. I want it to have a tab before it shows ABC. Let's say backslash T. And at the end, we're going to say backslash N. Same thing for this. And this. As an example. So now if we run it again, and let's say, well, append, we'll keep it for a bit. And we go check the file. We'll notice that now after the meow, the king meow, go to next line. Remember that it's appending to the previous file, so all the stuff here is still there. But after the king meow, go to the new line, tab, and write ABC. Tab. So this is a tab. Notice it's a one character, not a multiple space. That's why it's jumping. And go write ABC and then go new line. Tab again, ABC, and then stuff. So now let's say if I added a new thing and I do tab, 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 and here I say Reza, and just so you don't see the same text all the time, and over here I write wolf, and over here I write meow. And we could even put tabs in between them, and I write Jiggle, Jiggy, I don't know, Gigi, Goo, whatever, and we run it again. And there's a lot of other escape characters that we do. So again, this is from the previous. We don't care. The first part is Reza. So a lot of tabs, which is usually like 3-4 spaces. Then write Reza, then go new line. A lot of tabs, Reza, new line. One tab, wolf. One tab, wolf. 4 tabs, giggle. Here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, giggle. New line, 1 tab, yeah. New line, 1 tab, yeah. Is that clear with everyone? Now, if you want to format this, a better one would be probably print writer. Actually, let's do one more. So this, I'm going to keep it for you guys. How should we keep it for you guys? Let's do a little, this. Actually, we're going to take this whole thing. I want to put it inside of a function. Extract method. This was the file writer. File writer sample. So it's just right here, okay? If you want to use it, just uncomment this and you could use it, but it's there, it's doing it, it's fine. Just gonna grab, well, this try, we're gonna modify it a bit, okay? So the try was to get this writer opened, is to try and access the file and be able to modify it. So this try, we could also say, try to use this file. If you can't use it, then do something else. So again, we're gonna grab this file. And let's say this one, we're going to use something else. In this case, we're going to use the print writer. So let's just write print writer, whatever, test. Okay, this time we're going to try to see if we could use this file. So we're trying a resource. So this is a try resource. We put that inside parameters. You'll notice the previous one, we did not do that. We could have. And this time we're going to use a print writer. I'm going to create a variable for that as well. Print writer equals new print writer. And we're going to give it the file that we're using, my file. Right? And again, it's going to give us an error. Well, it says, hey, watch out, there's an exception where it could be file not found exception. So we need to deal with this. So what we're going to do is, again, do a catch. And we're going to say file not found exception, and our errors are gone. So this try is going to see if we could get this resource, this file, and if it can't, it'll just ignore the whole block of the try, everything inside this. If any errors happen, it will go do whatever's inside this block. Again, we're not really dealing with it. We could write on the console, say error writing to file, let the user deal with it, etc., etc. Okay, so now if we get this file, this print writer kind of gives us a bit more power. Print writer, and we could say, hey, print reza. Print writer. Let's try a couple of these. You'll notice print ln is there too. So now we could say print ln. We forgot to add a space, so we're going to put space is the best. So remember, print ln is like it's like output, it's like system.out print ln, which is basically print out the text that you put in there and then go to the new line. So now we could write print writer. You could use a lot of these things. Let's say print I am on the new line. So now if I run this, you'll notice a new file is created, which is the print writer test. And if we look at it, this time we don't need to use escape characters, which are still useful and we could still use them, but we didn't have to because there's different functions. Print writer test. Reza is the best. I am on the new line. Right? Because this print ln at the end of this will go to the next line. So this was the same as saying backslash n, escape character n. And we could still use it. Now it would do 2 new lines if we try this again. So notice there's an extra space line here. Cool? Any questions with this? So if you guys are good with this, we're gonna do one last thing, which is reading from files. And this one is a pretty easy one because we already done that with reading the resource from a user. So the first thing is, we're gonna go ahead and put this inside of method. This one we were using the print writer, so we're gonna say print writer sample. And again, if you want to try it out, just uncomment it, call the function, use it. The next time is to read from a file. And there's a bunch of, again, classes that does that for us. But there's one we've been using nonstop, which could still be used for this. And the one I'm talking about is obviously the scanner in Java. And again, like the three of them, they all need to have their specific inputs. You need to import the code before you could use the code. You'll notice that this one is saying stars because we're using two different classes from I/O. One being, well, three of them actually. One is the file, another one is the print writer, and the third one is the file writer. And all three of them are inside this location, java.io. That's why they're using the star. If we wanted to, we could have specified each one of them themselves, such as saying file, then doing the same thing, import java.io print writer, import java.io, what's the last one, the file writer. We could have done this too and it would have been fine. Okay, so this is something to consider. Let's come back to our scanner. So usually our scanner, what we do is we read from our console. So we're doing a scanner and we say new scanner, and inside this parameter, inside the constructor, we would specify where's the stream coming from. So from where am I reading? And usually you would type in something like system.in, which would be our console here. So let's just do a quick one with that. This output, what is your name? And over here we would say, let's say a string name, and we would say scanner, get the next word, right? So next was for the next word. And then output we could say hello name. So let's try this out. So now the first thing we're doing, I need to also import these, which is not imported. Just gonna import. There's this one too, which needs to be imported. Okay, this is why I was doing the star. So it imports like 6 things so we don't get errors. Anyway, let's moving on. So again, I'm gonna ask, what is your name? So let's go back here. So what is your name? Now the computer is waiting for the user's input. So the computer is stuck at this line. It's waiting for the next word. So this is a bit scary because you could have entered multiple words, right? And this is not good. So in this case, it's waiting for the enter key to be pressed, and then it's going to take the first word that it finds, and the rest is going to stay inside the buffer. And this is a bad thing. So usually you would clean the buffer or whatnot. But for now, let's assume that he's always going to enter the correct thing. So let's say my name is, let's say, I don't know, let's make some new names. Porcarica. I like that. So my name is Porcarica. I press enter. It's gonna grab that name, put it inside the variable string name, and then we could use that variable to say hello name. So hello Porcarica. So I press enter, and you'll notice it says hello Porcarica. Right? Now, rather than grabbing it from the console, we could grab it from a file as well. So let's go ahead and put this inside of a file. Refactor, extract method. We're gonna say this is read from console. So again, we're gonna comment this out if you need to know how to read from console. So this time we're gonna read from a file. So we're gonna say, actually, first of all, we're gonna say our file. Actually, let's go ahead and copy this line. We're gonna read from that file, and here we're gonna say scanner. Again, scanner equals new scanner, where this time not giving system in, which is the console, we're gonna give it the file that I'm trying to read from. And there's an error. So again, we need to deal with the the possibility where the file is not found, right? The name tells you everything. File not found. So again, we could do this in a try resource, and we could catch the file not found exception. And again, you would do something here, and in this case, let's say file could not be found. Right? One way of doing stuff. So actually, in this case, it's fine. We're not going to deal with this too much. We could go a bit further and make it a bit more pretty. We could put this inside the ER, which make it colorful. There's a lot of things we need to learn over time. But for now, we just want to read and write from file. And we already wrote to a file. Now we're trying to read it. So if the scanner works, this file is going to be open for us to read from it. Usually a scanner, we could use a couple of the functionalities. One of them was scanner.nextLine, which gives you the whole line. Again, if we do Control Q, it gives us information about that. Next, which gives us the next word, and it could keep going. And another stuff that you could see here is, does it have a next line or a next word? And this is important because we don't know when the file is going to end, so we need to go through the file for each line printed out. Right? So what we're going to do here, oops, let's make the screen a bit bigger. Inside this try, we're going to create a while loop where we don't know how many times we're doing this. We're going to say scanner, does it has a next line? If it does, well then we want to go and read that line. So in this case, let's say string the line equals scanner next line. And for now, we're just going to go ahead and print it out to the screen by saying the line. So now if I run this, it should print out all the stuff in my file. Reza is the best. Let's take off the extra, well, we'll keep the extra line here. So there's 3 lines. It's going to read each line and print it out on my console. And again, you guys have the videos. You could pause the video, take your time going through it. And we could see here, so the scanner is checking, is there a new line inside the file? If yes, grab that line with next line, and then print it to the screen. So Reza is the best. Is there a new line? Yes, it's an empty line. Grab that line, save it in this variable, and then print it to the screen, which we get the second line, which is empty. And he does it again for the third line. Cool? So with this, we could do some funky stuff, such as writing to a file however we want in a Morse code and a whatever code, such as we could store all names, Reza, Monica, David, Joe, anything really. Let's take some of you guys, Komal, Richa, etc. Okay? Now, we could grab those lines or those words or whatever, separate them, modify them, do however we want, and do something else with it, such as we could create a array list of names. As an example, array list of string, and this is going to be our names. And we don't know how many names they're going to be, but we know that as many names as come in, we're going to store them inside that. Now we could do names dot add the line, and that's going to be their names, right? And you could do funky stuff. You could have created objects. You could have done more complex things by understanding how to do this, right? And eventually, somewhere along the line, you could have printed those names, do whatever. It's up to you, really. So if we wanted to, after gathering all the names, we could say cout the names are, and now we create a for loop, which we go through the names. So for each name, I don't like this extra line here. So this is a for each loop. So for each name inside, this little colon means inside names. So for each name inside my array, do something. What do we want to do? We want, for each of those names, we want to print it out. So let's say cout. Let's put a new tab, right? And print out that specific name. Notice this is plural with an S, so it means it's an array. This is usually how we name things. Whenever it's plural, it means a lot of things. And this one is singular, which means we're going for each of those names inside the list of names. So the colon means inside what place? Inside the list of names. For each one of them, make this value, for each one of them, put the value inside this variable where we use it, and then do it again for the next value. So now we should have a list of names being printed to the screen. And that's what you see here. All right. So this is the end of it. Now we know how to write and how to read. And the cool part is, notice as the names get more, so let's say print writer here, I add more wolf, meow, etc. Lol. Okay? As we add stuff to it, it's always gonna stay forever. So the data is persistent. The data is not volatile. The data could last forever until this file is not erased. Right? That's an interesting thing. So whatever the user's interaction is, we could store it, and the next time he comes back to the application, he could continue wherever he left off. And this is really important. Any questions? No? Okay. So that's that. Let me stop the recording.